Hello, welcome to the Basketball Soapbox. I'm your host, Daniel Daly. I've been away a little bit from the Basketball Soapbox because of the Heat and Celtics series in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I wanted to wait because I didn't think it was fair to give a game by game analysis with the Celtics down 3-0. At that point, it was just like they're going to lose if they're going to lose the series or they're going to battle their way and find a way to come back. And I wanted to wait until that series was over to give a final assessment of that series. That series is over. The Miami Heat are going to the NBA Finals. The Boston Celtics tried to battle back and become the first team to come back from a 3-0 deficit. They won games 4, 5, and 6. 6 in fantastic fashion on a buzzer beater by Derek White by the slightest margins. And they come into game 7, and everything falls apart. And that's been a cognizant, a kind of a recurring theme with the Boston Celtics in terms of shooting themselves in the own foot. But I will get into that. This is episode 49. What's next for the Celtics in NBA Finals preview? I'm going to get into the Celtics, the Heat, and looking ahead to the Denver Nuggets and Miami Heat Finals. But before I get started with that, I want to say congratulations to the Miami Heat. You can't say enough about this team and on the course of their journey to the NBA throughout the NBA playoffs, coming in as an 8th seed. People want to say that they're not an 8th seed and that they were last year they were a 1 seed, but that was last year. This year is a different year. They look like dog shit throughout the whole NBA season. They come into the play-in tournament. They lose to Atlanta in the first round. And then within 3 minutes of the Chicago game, they're down with their season on the line, about to be one of the first teams to be eliminated by a play-in team. And it's looking bad, and they find a way to squeeze that out and win. And they go throughout the playoffs. Going against the Bucks, Giannis gets hurt in the first game, I believe. And, yeah, that did happen. But the Milwaukee Bucks still have Drew Holiday. They still have Chris Middleton. They still have Brook Lopez. They still have a good defense. They still have a good offense. Of course, Giannis makes everything go for them. But they still had players against the series and to win that series. And against Miami, probably against Spo, that's probably not the best matchup. Of course, there's some coaching blunders on Mike Budenholzer's part. That's why he's not the coach anymore. But I'm not going to take that away from the Heat. They were an 8th seed. And they took Giannis's best punch when he did come back, I believe in games 5 and 6, or how many ever the Heat won in that series. Giannis had 26 and 13 the game prior, and then finished that series with 38 and 20. They took their best punch, and they still were able to win that game in that series, especially exemplified by Jimmy Butler being down 6 in the game and going at Drew Holiday, who's probably one of the best defenders in the game. Most of them, of course, the legendary underrated player people always say. And they were down 6, and Jimmy Butler turned to him and said, "I own you. You can't guard me." And once that happened, it was kind of like, uh-oh. And Miami found a way to get through that series and upset the Milwaukee Bucks, who had championship aspirations, had thoughts of getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals, eventually against the Celtics or the Sixers. Those were the big-time matchups as the head seeds. And they didn't do that. The Milwaukee Bucks couldn't do that. Mike Budenholzer was fired because of that. They just recently hired Adrian Griffin, who I will probably do a little video on and try to get a little bit more information about him. But continuing on to Miami, they go into this blood feud with the Knicks. It's everything that you thought it would be in terms of toughness, a throwback series to the 90s. Of course, without the fights. Let's be obvious here. Of course, without the fights, but the toughness in that series, the will of the Miami Heat in that series. Jimmy Butler injured his ankle in Game 5, I believe, and that was tough. But the Miami Heat find a way to overcome that and go to the Eastern Conference Finals again. And the Heat are back again, and unexpectedly, everybody's like, "Oh, the Celtics are going to roll over them." I thought the Celtics were going to win in 6 because I'm like, Miami's going to find a way to get a game or two. They're going to junk it up enough to make it a series. Like, Miami's just not going to roll over, and the Celtics usually make things a little harder than but they need to. I didn't know the Celtics would make it this hard for themselves, and I'll get into that. But the Miami Heat going to Boston, win game one. Some late game mess ups by the Celtics. Game two, same thing happens. I think we should have leaned a little bit more defensively in there. Game three is a blowout in Miami, and it's like, uh-oh. And I'm like sitting there at that point in time, I'm like, I can't give a game-to-game analysis right now, especially as a Celtics fan. With the Celtics being down 3-0, is there any way that the Celtics can come back and make that a series? And I thought that was the right way to go about it, because I'm like, if they lose, I can at least make an episode right there and then, boom, paste it. Boom. The Celtics eventually end up winning the next 3 games. 2 in Miami, 1 back at home, and set up game 7. And I'll get into the Celtics part of it, but what Miami was able to do to try to bring out the zone and bring out a type of shifting zone, Caleb Martin shooting the lights out, Duncan Robinson shooting the lights out, Jimmy Butler leading that charge, Bam Adebayo being toughness and doing all the little intangible things for the Miami Heat, eventually got them the win in that game, closes the series, and are heading back to the NBA Finals. And the way they play is not surprising, right? Like, Miami's going to show up. But I do think that I'll get into the other thing that was surprising about the Miami Heat. But Miami Heat culture does exist. We're not going to sit there and act like that doesn't exist right now. They have so many guys, down to Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra, Chris Quinn, I think he's an assistant coach there, Alonzo Mourning, Bob McAdoo, Miami Mafia, whatever it is there. And then they have Udonis Haslem, who people joke about and say he's not that good or whatever the case may be. He's taking up a roster spot. What he does for that team is keep them in line along with everybody else. Everybody kind of just manage themselves. Like, they're all accountable for each other. And Eric Spoelstra leading the charge there, and Jimmy Butler's leadership he spoke on after the series. And it's just like, you guys can't ignore that anymore. That's not something. The way organizations are trying to do it around the league, Miami has it right. Regardless if they are talented or not, there's a standard there. There's a work ethic there. There's a commitment to excellence, regardless of who's on the roster. As you can see, as I think they had 7 undrafted players. I think Cody Zeller is the highest draft pick they had. I think he was a 4th-round pick way back in 2013, something like that. But you look at this roster, you look at what they've done, continuously have guys ready. And that's what it is. Heat culture, next man up mentality. Everybody's accountable. Everybody can play. Everybody stay ready. Veterans on the bench, veterans in the coaching staff, veterans in management. You think about Pat Riley. I think his 19 finals he's been in as a coach, executive, and a player. I think it's 2 as a player, 10 as a coach, and then I think 7 as an executive. And when you think about that, sustained excellence even throughout the NBA history, just the NBA lifer, Pat Riley, it's like, what the hell? Like, he accounts for a quarter of the NBA Finals. Like, that's insane. And when you think of guys like LeBron and Magic and Kareem, all these guys that have played in a lot of finals, you think of Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, who have coached in NBA Finals. And it's like Pat Riley sustains that, right? Like, throughout every level of basketball, he was able to make the finals. And his ability to do that and continuously do that, can't say enough about the Miami Heat and what they were able to do from top to bottom. But where do we start in this series? We got to go to Jimmy Butler. We got to go to Jimmy Butler and Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Nearly 25 points, nearly 8 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2.6 steals over the course of the series. I can't say enough about Jimmy Butler. As a Celtics fan, it sucks that the Miami Heat won. Like that, I didn't want the Celtics to lose like that. But it just speaks to what I've been saying about Jimmy Butler for a long time now. Chicago, Minnesota, Philadelphia. They could have had Jimmy Butler on their roster, And at points, somebody that they needed, somebody who was a leader, somebody who was going to hold people accountable, and somebody who was going to rise to the occasion of being a big level player. And of course, when you think about Jimmy Butler, everybody kind of puts him in that Chauncey Billups category of a guy that's not elite, but a guy that can take big shots, be a leader, be accountable in that regard, right? And people called him a cancer and stuff like that in Chicago, Minnesota, even Philly to a certain degree. And it's like when you look at those situations, it's like all those franchises need Jimmy Butler, right? Like in terms of what Chicago is, they have DeMar DeRozan, they have Zach LaVine, but really no definitive leader. You can kind of feel like Patrick Beverley filled that role for Chicago, right? But he isn't that type of player to lead the team and put the team on his back. He's not going to do that. You look at Minnesota and all the changeover that they've had, and the countless times with Andrew Wiggins, Karl Anthony Towns, especially that practice where he came in with the G Leaguers or the second unit, whatever the case may be, and kicked their ass and then did the Rachel Nichols interview. You go to Philadelphia with all the babying of Ben Simmons, the coaching of Brett Brown, all that stuff led to his departure there. Of course, he wanted to get paid. They chose, eventually, it was Al Horford and I can't remember the other guy they signed up, but Tobias Harris or whatever the case may be. And that's where they decided to allocate their money instead of put it into Jimmy Butler. He goes to Miami, where Miami is cut from the rug, hold everybody accountable, 0% body fat, all this other shit that they do down there that just doesn't make sense to the rest of the league. And they fit like a glove. And this is now their second finals appearance with Jimmy Butler, third Eastern Conference Finals, I believe. And it just speaks to work ethic. It speaks to a franchise committing to somebody and actually investing in them and actually believing in them, working hard, working through things. Because last year, I believe, before they made that run to the Eastern Conference Finals, there was a blow up between him and Spoelstra where they were literally about to fight, and Udonis Haslem had to come in and basically kind of check and cool everything down. And people were calling Jimmy Butler a cancer then and saying, hey, it's not over. It's over for them. He's going to be out of there. And they were able to flip that as a number one seed and get to the Eastern Conference Finals, come within a shot of the finals. This year, everything looks like shit. Literally everything looks like shit. A lot of guys are just in and out. Kyle Lowry's not 100%. Jimmy Butler had some couple injuries. And they look terrible. They're the worst shooting team in the league. I'll get into that. Their record isn't good. They're falling out of place there in the Eastern Conference. And, of course, people are saying that they're not an 8th seed, but I just went over their track record of what they were able to do this playoffs. And everything looks bad, and they're able to make this run. And it starts with Jimmy Butler. His ability to lead this team through these peaks and valleys of the season and get to the playoffs and then just steps up his game. And that's what he's been able to do consistently. And again, I'm just looking at those franchises, Chicago, Minnesota, Philadelphia. Look what he would have done for Philadelphia. He fits that city like a glove. He fits their culture like a glove city-wise. And they picked James Harden over him. They picked Tobias Harris, Al Horford, all these other guys that they tried to replace Jimmy Butler with, and it's still a second-round exit for them. He goes to Miami and is able to have these 3 runs now. And it's like, this isn't supposed to be happening to a guy like this, right? Like where he came from, JUCO, signing his letter of intent and faxing it in from his McDonald's job to Marquette, goes to Marquette, late first rounder, grinds his way up through Chicago to become an all-star, goes to Minnesota. They haven't been to the playoffs in 20 years. He gets them there with Tibbs. All of that falls out. All the things he said in the Rachel Nichols interview. Goes to Philadelphia. The situation there where everybody's kind of walking on eggshells because they don't want to get Ben Simmons angry. Brett Brown doesn't have a full control on everything. And then he had, I believe in the J.J. Redick interview, he said, they asked Joel Embiid, can he control Jimmy Butler? And Jimmy Butler said, once I heard that, I was gone. And the ability not to hold each other accountable in Philly was another part of the departure there. Goes to Miami, and they fit like a glove where they're yelling. Everybody works hard. They hold everybody to a certain standard. Jimmy Butler starts with that. Like, that doesn't happen without him. Like, Miami Heat have made playoffs and been out in the first round and stuff like that since the Dwayne Wade and Bosh era and stuff like that. Low seed, not really good, being tough. But Jimmy Butler gave them another level of play. And when you see that continuously and throughout the playoffs, big time ability, big shots, big scoring outings, big games, Jimmy Butler has done that in every single series. He has done that. He has put the team on his back. And even in game 6, when the Celtics were up 10, he ends up scoring 12 in the last, 4 minutes to eventually take the lead in that game. And Derek White's buzzer beater saves the Celtics. And you think about Jimmy Butler, and it's just like, yo, that was on a chance of him defeating the Celtics, right? Like, getting rid of the Celtics, right? And I can't speak enough about Jimmy Butler. I always respect his game. I respect where he came from, and then his grind up to the top. And to make it back to the finals as the Eastern Conference Finals MVP on the Celtics floor, that makes me sick. But in terms of what Jimmy Butler comes to the game, it means to the game of basketball in terms of just showing up, believing in yourself, having a franchise that believes in you, and the ability to turn it on and reap the rewards of this to get to another finals run. Can't speak enough about that. Credit to him. Credit to him, absolutely. There's a